Hello. I am going live with Chantel from Rooted is Radical, and I'm going to invite her now. Go live with. If you just bear with me. We are going to be talking about femininity and surrender. And it's quite a controversial topic. So it'll be really interesting to dive into some stuff that actually Chantel is the one who introduced me to this whole new world of viewing womanhood and femininity and the masculine. So I'm pretty excited to talk to her about it when she joins. And we both have, there she is. So Chantel, I can see you joined. I sent you a request. You have to accept it to have your video come up here. It says you're unable to join. Let me try again. There you go. Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yep.
Good to see you.
I know, long time no see.
I know it's been, what, a year and a half?
More than that,
More.
actually.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
So much has happened.
Ye- yes, that's an understatement, but yeah, a lot has happened.
Yeah,
I have hindsight now and I can say that it was good, but yeah,
yeah,
a lot of stuff. Yeah.
intense.
Yeah. I
So,
think for a lot of people, I think it's been intense for a lot of people, especially like the last like half of last year or beginning of this year. I think like with like going into 2021 and now like going into the new um astrological year. I think it's just been a lot for everyone. Maybe
yeah,
not everyone, but a lot of people.
I know that's what I'm hearing from everyone I know. Everyone's having
Yeah.
an intense time. Um,
Yeah.
Hi, Ariel.
Hi.
Um,
She was with us at the retreat too.
yes, we were all
Yeah.
together, um, and it was so lovely. But so just to kind of introduce what we're talking about,
Yeah,
um,
I don't really know what we're talking about, so I'm kind of excited.
yeah, it'll be good. But I thought femininity and surrender would be a great kind of segue to start with and
Yeah.
kind of just see where it takes us. Because I was saying before you joined that you were actually the person that introduced me to this whole new world of femininity through,
Really?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah, I
I
saw,
would just feel like I just feel like you and I are like on the same timeline, so
yeah, you
yeah.
posted something before I even, was it before I met you? Maybe before I met you about
Hmm.
Namaste More. Yes, it was
Yeah.
before.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was following you because you do great posts and share great content, and
Yeah.
I learned a lot from you. And then you introduced me to Sri Namaste More, and I saw that you'd gone to her retreat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so much opened up for me just viewing, actually viewing feminism in a different light from what she shared, which is really controversial because
Sure.
most of my friends are feminists and radical feminists, and this is a completely different direction.
Right.
But yeah, then I started to kind of be taught by Sri Namaste more through her container soft Sanctum of Feminine Transformation, and my
Okay,
whole life
so
changed.
you are in soft.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have
Okay,
been
cool.
for like a year and a half.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any like specific questions? Is there a spot you want to like jump off from? I could pretty much.
Okay, so I guess let's start with surrender. Like, okay, maybe we should frame it more like femininity. What did you learn going down this path of
Mm.
femininity and embodying femininity? Like, how did it impact your life specifically?
Yeah, well, I can just start with like how it started for me, which is just I started realizing because I was like super liberal feminist, like all that stuff. And I just remember thinking like this I would just think like this stuff doesn't really seem like feminist or feminine or like for women. It just seems like women want access to really masculine things or to the patriarchy, if that's what we're calling it. Like and like women want access to a world that was created by men for men. And I'm like, that's really weird because this is supposed to like be a movement for women, but so much of how this world operates doesn't actually serve like female biology. Like, and I mean it like at a very cellular level. Like, so, like the work week and like all that sort of thing. I'm like, so yeah, I just started questioning how it was interesting that women were just wanting access, not so much like wanting to change anything about it. So I started thinking that, and I was like the first person in my mind. Of course, now I know that I'm not the first person at all. But this is like the first time I had ever like heard this or like thought it. Um, and then I started reading some like books, some feminist books or radical feminist books. It was basically like women saying the same thing about how like modern feminism is essentially just women, how they put it would be like beating down the door of like to try to get access to the patriarchy, like women who are just wanting to like perpetuate these systems. I mean, and if you think about it, like you think of like the medical system and the education system and this idea of like CEOs and like climbing to the top of the corporate ladder, like all of that. So yeah, it was more about that than it was actually like, well, what serves our bodies, our desires as women, which kind of led me to another thing of like this idea of like men and women being equal was just like not never resonated with me. Um, and I think people get a little confused when I say that. It's not that like, oh, I think we deserve different. Yeah, it's not like I think that men and women shouldn't be treated with the same amount of respect or care or attention or whatever. But just that men and women are not equal, they're not the same. And so that idea that like men and women are the same, and I think there was even like for a while, like there's no difference between like the female brain and the male brain, and like it's all the same. Like that never resonated with me either. I was like, men and women are clearly different. So this whole like what I now see is like a gaslighting of telling us that we're the same or can do the same things as men, when in reality, it's actually cost women so much to attempt to operate and live in a world that was created for more of like the male biology. So that's kind of like where it led me, or that was like the initial stages, and then slowly but surely, I just started finding teachers and people who were saying really similar things and who could say it better than I could. Which then led me down, yeah, I guess to the path of femininity specifically. I'm like trying to think of like, there's like all these little branches, little like paths I could take right now. And I'm like, where do I take this? I guess the first thing that's coming up is like, so for me growing up, I was what we would now call like a tomboy. So, like I wore the baggy pants and did sports and didn't like, I was very like, ooh, with the girly things. And in hindsight, what that was is like, I grew up thinking that, men had more power, men were respected more, men were seen as like more strong and more worthy, and like they got more attention. Um, they could like get away with things. I remember in school, like the boys would get away with being really funny. And if I would try to be funny, like I would get in trouble. So I just had this like conditioning of like women are like weaker, women are like just all that like feminine stuff was not good.
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, I see that like I was contorting myself to be what I perceived as like the thing or the person in society that just got more credit, got more attention and approval and access. And so there's this weird thing like one of the like paths I want to go on is like we have these ideas now that I heard this statistic that, and I'm kind of rambling, but I heard this statistic that most people that identify as non-binary, it's like 80% of them or more are actually females, which points to something to me. It's not, and it points to something because I can relate to it from when I was younger. And it's like, I think that what that actually is, patriarchal conditioning. Um, Women believing that their feminine essence or the idea of surrender, which we can talk about, um, kind of makes you like the one, like not the one with the upper hand. Like no one wants to be this idea of like power. Everyone wants to have power, but power in the sense that we've been like conditioned to view power, which is a masculine form of power. So yeah, I guess that can like lead me into surrender. I think the feminine or female, however we're defining it here, form of power just looks completely different than masculine power, like completely. It's been my experience that when I try to occupy masculine power, and I know all these like labels and terms are like triggering to people, like masculine, feminine, male, female, but like
Yeah.
I don't care. It's language, and we use language to, describe things. But yeah, I learned that when I try to occupy what I now see as a masculine or patriarchal form of power, like my life just doesn't work. Like it just doesn't, things just don't happen. I don't think that for me, this idea of forcing and pushing and hustling and how else is it? It's controlling. That's a big one. It has always just led me down like really bad places. So my work in life now, I feel like the lesson of my life is to learn the art of surrender. And that's really hard. Like, that's really, really hard, I think, for women this day and age. And I say that because I know how hard it is for me. I mean, like, ego death hard. Like, if you can actually pull it off, like, if you can actually do surrender correctly, if that's a thing, there will be an ego death. There will be a complete annihilation of your ego. And I mean, that's scary,
Yeah.
So I get why it's so hard for so many people. I mean, it's just like the stories will just come up of like, but if I don't do something, or if I don't try, if I don't say something, if I don't control, if I don't, then it won't happen. I won't get what I want. Um, I'll get taken advantage of. Like that's a big one. Um, people will just, stomp all over me. And like there is a distinction to be made in surrender and, acquiescence or like being a doormat, which is not what I'm talking about. It's different. Um, so yeah, and it is an art because I think at first when I was like, oh, I'm gonna like try this surrender thing, there's layers to it because I think women are so good at manipulation. Like we're so good at it. I don't even think we're aware that we're doing it. Like we can play the manipulation game on the 4D level, on the 5D level. Like we can actually manipulate people and the world on the metaphysical level. I think that's how good women are. So whenever I first attempted to like, practice the art of surrender, I realized that I was actually still not letting go. Like I was still trying to manipulate, but in these very, very subtle ways that unless you have a lot of self-awareness, like you might not even realize you're doing it. Maybe everyone does realize they're doing it on some level, but I had to realize like, oh, like I'm still trying to control. I'm still so it's like like even I realized just how deep my games went. I realized that even when I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like do nothing, like even the doing nothing was like in an attempt to get something, like, oh, if I just sit back and do nothing, like let's just talk about a man, for example. Like, oh, I know that the way to like bring him back to me is to like do nothing. And, you know, like completely like withdraw my attention and go put my attention elsewhere. And I'm not saying this is bad, by the way. Like this is, knowing these things is good. And also, whenever I just noticed when I was like outcome oriented, that that's still like some level of the game. That's still like on some level you have some expectation that there's going to be some outcome. Again, I don't think that that's bad. I think that like living with um yeah, like having goals or desires and, doing things that meet those that can bring that stuff to us, it's not bad per se. Um, but yeah, I just noticed like all my different levels of games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, God, it does go really deep. And I'll just share like a little experience that I've had with my husband in the
Yeah.
past week, which has been next level of surrender on my part. So it's been like a year and a half that I've been part of the soft group, Sanctum of Feminine Transformation, and I too was so controlling and so um, really in this masculine energy which I was trying to inhabit, but it just wasn't working because it was going against my, my sovereign essence, which is feminine and a woman.
Right.
That's what I am. And so I was in this masculine energy of kind of always questioning my husband when he said things or did things, or
Right.
trying to have my word in on things and not just
Right.
allowing him to lead and for me to follow, which
Yeah.
I think the imagery of a dance, and when you're dancing with someone, if both people are trying to lead, the dance is going to be a mess. Someone has to lead and the other has to
Right.
follow with grace and not with resentment and, oh, they're leading. You just completely surrender and let the person lead you on this beautiful
Right.
dance. But obviously, there has to be trust in order for that to happen. And I think that's where the whole distinction between being a doormat and actually it being this beautiful art of feminine energy and masculine energy comes into play, because I chose my husband and I chose
Right.
him with my highest perspective of this is the man that I choose to have a family with and to be my husband and lead us into greatness, basically. But then I kept taking it back and being like, no, no, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to, you know.
Right.
And so anyway, a year and a half goes by of doing this work and being conscious of it and, you know, surrendering, but not fully surrendering. And on last Wednesday, over a carafe of water, that was like the carafe that broke the camel's back. We just had this
Mm-hmm.
like this exchange where it was literally a power struggle. I asked him something, he told me an answer, and I kept pushing for a different answer for him to think
Right.
harder. And where is the
Mm-hmm.
carafe? You had it last. And he just
Mm-hmm.
put his foot down. He was like, no, you know, you're really disrespecting me as a man. I
Mm-hmm.
told you I don't know where it is. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this like fear bubble up from a really deep and dark place. And this was
Mm-hmm.
my go death experience around surrender in the feminine, because this fear came up and I was suddenly like, I'm losing control. I have no power. Like, I'm going to be nothing. Like, what is this dynamic? Like, how can I be with
Yeah.
someone where I am, you know, not allowed to ask them where the bloody carafe is more
Mm-hmm.
than
Mm-hmm.
once? Like, what?
Right.
And I really was, I left him. I mean, I didn't leave him. I left the room and I was just fuming. I was so angry. I stormed off. And first, I think I said some stuff to wound him, wound his pride. Like, oh, well, a real man would have lit the fire for me downstairs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was just coming from this very wounded place of fear. And
Right.
I came downstairs, I gathered myself, I saw on my wall where I have written unconditional forgiveness in my office on a project I'm working on. And I just really went into this deep space of unconditional forgiveness, you know, attempting to cultivate it, but then really softening into, okay, what is the feminine to me? Like
Mm-hmm.
what is it to be feminine? And what can I tap into in the deepest part of myself that allows me to let go and surrender and allows him to have the last say, because it didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
good, that power struggle and me trying
Right.
to assert my control. It was not a natural thing. It was
Mm-hmm.
coming from shadow and coming from fear. So
Right.
I did some work on myself. I listened to one of Namaste Moore's videos on from the feminine, fabulous, fascinating feminine wifing class or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this complete inner shift, and I wrote a letter to him, sent it to him, and he didn't speak to me for like 2 days. And the old me would have then been like, did you read my message? What's going on? You know, I've tried, can you just come to me? And instead, because that's another form of controlling, I let go and I allowed him to have his process of healing from the wounding that I had done. And I really honored that I had wounded this very like sacred masculine part of him. And
Mm-hmm.
when he finally came to me, it was like I had this experience of, I completely surrender everything to you.
Mm-hmm.
I hand it all over. I give it up. It's yours, and I trust
Yeah.
you. And it was such like a cosmic experience of
Yeah.
total letting go.
Right.
And then I see how insidious the control patterns are within me, where he came up to me just now in the kitchen before this live and said, oh, here, I prepared this for you. It's a dictaphone. He said, I got
Mm-hmm.
this dictaphone for you. I've charged it. Wear it everywhere you go. And just as thoughts come to you, record them, because this is really going to help you
Well,
on,
that's a good idea. I should
yeah,
get one of those.
it's really going to help you, you know, on creating the school that you're doing. And my instant thing was like, no, I don't want to wear something on me the whole time. I've got a phone if I want to do a voice note. This is really annoying. No, that's my inner dialogue. And
Right.
then I was like, oh shit. Okay, this is it. This is part of it. If I'm surrendering
Totally.
to him,
Yeah.
then yes. Okay. Yeah, yeah, okay. And so I put it on and he said, you can wear it like this so it doesn't bang on you and you'll be comfortable. And I recorded my first note, which was about how that little inner process went.
Right.
And I'm so grateful to him, because my resistance is not my feminine, and his
Right.
reading is like very, very powerful if I allow it to be.
Well, right. And like in a situation like that, if we don't automatically, we have this thing, or like I know I do, where I feel like I on some level, like I truly do know better than everyone or my partner, you know, like I know what he should be eating, and I know what he, like everything, like I wanted to control what he wore and like what he ate and how he, just everything, and it's crazy. But if we can like drop that and instead, like in your situation, see like, oh my God, like you can develop gratitude for like my husband like sees something and like he bought me this little recorder so I can record all of my thoughts. And it's just like you can develop so much gratitude because you just see how much they do care. And something I learned in a big training I did is that men actually want to please us so much. Like we don't even realize the level of how much they want to please us. And I liked what you were saying, just the story you told, because what it reminded me of was like women actually don't want that much control. We don't actually want to have to control everything so much. And we don't want to have to always be the ones to, yeah, be in the driver's seat. And what I see a lot, like on one hand, it's true that in order to be able to fully surrender, we need to be with someone that we trust. So that's totally true. And there's a shadow side of that, which is I see a lot of women use the excuse of like, I can't trust him in order to not surrender. So I hear so many women be like, well, if he would just XYZ, then I could surrender. And it's like, no, no, no. Like surrender is not supposed to be easy, you know, it's not supposed to be, you know, like the easy choice of like, oh well, if he just did everything my way, and if he just did everything the way that I thought he should do it, then I could surrender. No. I'll tell you kind of like my most recent like big aha moment. So I don't want to go into the details about my last relationship, but it ended, and it ended really bad. And in our relationship, we really practiced like this dynamic and like the art of devotion and stuff like that. Or at least I tried to the best of my abilities. Um, and what I realized when he left, so he left and essentially like there's no contact between us, and that's his decision. And what I realized at a certain point, like a few weeks ago, is like just this, like, as a woman, like just this nagging feeling of like, I want to be devoted. Like, I want to surrender to someone and I want to be like in like a devoted union. Like, I want to feel devoted. And I had this aha moment on my, like, I took this trip and I was like, oh my God, like, I can still be devoted. Like, the point of devotion isn't like, oh, I'll be devoted so long as like things look like this, he's behaving this way. It's like, no, if I'm like like truly gonna like really play this game and like do this practice, then what better time to like practice than right now when like the object of my devotion won't even talk to me, for example. So in this example, like there's no communication. So it's like devotion is being devoted to every like stroke or decision that the masculine makes. And if the masculine in this situation has decided that like we're not talking, then my job is to like receive that penetration. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that's what the masculine has decided. And now my job as the feminine is to just sit in the fire of that feeling.
Mm.
And I know a lot of people will hear this and they're like, oh, but like you're just kind of like at the whim of him. Like, but here's the thing, it's like it is actually for me. Like, I don't do it, I'm not doing it in this case like for him. Like, I'm doing it for me. If I can sit in devotion And in this situation, devotion is no contact. And so my job is to feel the feelings and sit in the fire of what it feels like to not be able to like talk to this person or touch this person or whatever the feelings are. What's going to happen if I devote myself to the feeling of it is that there's going to be a transformation. Like it's going to change. I'm going to change. I'm going to transform. I'm not going to like distract myself and like gloss over the feelings and, repeat all the crap in my next relationship. Like I'm going to sit in the feelings until they change. And that's the gift of the masculine in this particular situation.
Mm.
And so, do you know Carolyn Elliott, Existential Kink?
Yeah, yeah, I love
It
her.
like what I realized was like it reminded me of a story that she told in the book, which is about Persephone and Pluto, or Persephone and Hades. This gets all like really crazy. This is where like if any woman doubts that like surrender is the ultimate power position for them, this is where like the power nugget is. So what I realized was like in the story of Persephone and Hades, this tale is that, basically it's a really awful story. Like Hades takes Persephone down to the underworld, like kidnaps her and like rapes her and tortures her. And it's like this really awful story. It's like what it's known in the world. But in like other secret mystery schools, the story is actually different, where it's a tale of Persephone kind of like splitting her psyche because everyone wants to experience themselves as other, right? So, like, we all want to experience the duality of existence. So, in other tales, it goes that Persephone kind of created Hades, like, in her own image. So, like, he's like this split part of Persephone because she wanted to experience something so other that she experienced transformation that she could only have by experiencing something so awful. So essentially, Hades was just like another version of Persephone. And now instead of seeing Hades as like this awful rapist, torturer, like evil person, she now viewed him as the most devoted lover because he gave her something her shadow or her psyche or herself on some level wanted. And this is where people get tripped up about like victim blaming and stuff, but I don't deal with that. This is like some really powerful shit. So yeah, so now she, instead of seeing him as this like really evil person, now Hades is a super devoted lover that gave her exactly what she wanted so that she could have an experience, like a certain type of experience, so that she can transform so deeply that she's like a complete, like, like more, just a higher, more loving, actualized version of herself that she could not have experienced without that experience. So when that like all shifted for me, like when and it's a choice, right? Like my situation, like to the regular, like 3D normal everyday person, if they were to hear my story, they would say like, that's fucking terrible. Like that's horrendous. I'm completely like I could totally be the victim.
Yeah.
And I think for like the first month or so, I totally like, you know, milked that victim story for sure.
Yeah.
But then when I just realized that, um, like if the power is in surrender and devotion, then where is that right now? And when I saw it as like, oh yeah, devotion isn't just when it feels good. Devotion isn't just like when they're here. Like devotion is devotion. And I'll sit in devotion to this man or to this mortal or this relationship until it shifts and I don't feel like it anymore and I want to devote myself to something else. But it's like right now, my devotion is calling for sitting in the fire of this particular decision, this stroke, if that's what you want to call it, and letting myself be transformed by it. And then now, like, oh, maybe this person's not so evil. Maybe I created this situation on a subconscious level, and he's giving me exactly what I want, which is what a devoted lover does.
Mm.
And like that to me is where the power is. Like there's just so like ever since I had that like oh my God and like it like really like penetrated my being, I feel like so much has lifted and I just feel so much happier too.
Wow.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that is some really deep stuff. And I know the story
Right.
of what happened, so it's even more like, wow, to
Yeah.
see and witness you where you're coming from and how you
Well,
are
it's like
working.
it's alchemy. You know, when
Yeah,
people talk about like alchemy, like that I mean, it's alchemy and it's like the hero's journey too, you know.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Transmuting and transforming whatever comes into our lives. And it's really the death of victim consciousness, this part,
Right.
which is, yeah, I'm all for that, uh,
Right.
for myself at least.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. And so I guess we could segue into the masculine and how. So something that I found really interesting from Namaste Moore's teachings is not to basically shit all over the masculine the way that we do, and we label men as the patriarchy, and the patriarchy is not men.
Right.
Actually, it's a system that has been put into place.
Right.
But my rediscovery through this process of how amazing men are,
Right.
and how amazing I need them to be in order for me to be fully in my feminine, because masculine and feminine um, need each other. They are
Right.
completely dependent on each other in order to
Right.
bring out the highest from each other. So
Right.
maybe we could talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, totally. I do want to just say, kind of going back a little bit to my last thing, I just want to make a clarification because I think a lot of people hearing something like that, and I know what comes up for a lot of women, and I know what would come up for me in the past is like, well, but what about him? Like you're just going to take all the responsibility, you know, like I think women are afraid when they take that level of responsibility that it absolves other people or the man from like his work. But taking responsibility isn't taking the blame.
Yeah.
And just because one chooses, or just because I choose to live my life with this level of like responsibility, I'm doing it for myself. And it doesn't mean that like, so my ex-partner in this situation, like it doesn't mean that like he doesn't have his own stuff to look at, doesn't mean he doesn't have his own karma, doesn't like he's got all of his stuff that he's going to have to, you know, deal with and look at, and but that's none of my business. So I just want everyone to understand that like when we choose to live like this level of like alchemical you know, magic and taking this level of responsibility, it doesn't absolve other people from their part in situations. But it is removing yourself from the position of needing to be the one that like delivers like their karma or like their you know it like needing to be the one to like show them like oh this is what you need to look at or this is what you need to deal with or like this is your part. It's like no, that's for them. They're on their own journey and I'm on mine. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to like
Yeah.
say that. Yeah.
It's radical responsibility, and for your life you're not taking
Right.
radical responsibility for his life, and
Right.
it's true sovereignty, because
Right.
you're in charge of yourself, and you are looking at every single crevice of how this situation has impacted you and been impacted by you, um,
Right.
and that is just amazing. If everyone lived like that, the world would be a very, very different place. um,
Yeah.
it's really cool. I don't want to interrupt a flow. I'm just gonna move to my charger because I think my
Sure.
battery is low. Mm, okay. Hey.
Okay, so you're wanting to move into more of the masculine.
Yeah, I just feel like they deserve a section.
Yeah. What do I want to say? Oops, my phone's falling because I just put mine on the charger too. Yeah. Um, it's interesting. I haven't really like, I don't feel like as of late I've been like really, what's the word, like submerged in that, like the world of the masculine, obviously, because I'm newly single in the past several months. But I will say, I had this experience, like what comes up, like when I hear about like the masculine, it's just like a story that I have, that something that happened to me recently, is that, so in our complex, I live in like a little community complex and there's a bunch of kids. And the other day, like, so there's like this a dad. It's like, actually, you know Celine, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Celine's partner, husband, or whatever. Um, so his two kids were like across the courtyard, and like one of them was, and he's like I've never heard him raise his voice. Like he's a very like grounded, calm dude. And one of the kids was like across the courtyard, and or both of his kids were across the courtyard, and like one of them starts like squeezing and grabbing or like hurting his other kid, and he was like trying to get his attention but he couldn't hurt it, and then all of a sudden his voice just like shouted his kid's name like I had never heard him like yell before. And I think like in the past I had this idea of like just that something like I used to be very into like peaceful. I mean, not that I'm into like abusive parenting now or anything, but I used to like be really into like peaceful parenting. So I would constantly undermine and emasculate my son's dad and stepdad just about how they were dealing with my son, how they were dealing with my
Same.
kid.
Same.
And um because I was wanting them to be more like me. And I feel like I've totally have changed like my feelings about that. But like I just know like when his voice, like when he shouted at the kid, like I just felt like, ooh, like I don't know, like I liked it. Whereas like in the past, I don't know, I might have judged it. I mean, maybe not have judged it because like he really did have to get his attention. But yeah, in the past, like I just had these ideas um about how to raise kids, and I feel like this masculine feminine work has really changed my perspective on that too. Just seeing that men and women are, again, we're just different, and like kids need different things. And I don't know, that's just an example recently of me noticing like a way that in the past I might have like judged something as like aggressive, but now I like it from the masculine. Yeah, I don't know. That's just what came up whenever you said what you said. So,
Yeah, no, I really relate to that. And I'm experiencing that right now with my husband. He's always looked to me to
mm,
lead when it comes to parenting, like
yeah,
our kids' health decisions and everything. He's just deferred to me, like you're the mother, you know in yourselves what the correct thing is, not
right,
from even a logical perspective, but from just that innate cellular knowing. And so
right.
that's just so cool that he's been that way. But then when it comes to parenting stuff, he's also looked to me. And I've been as well very much in the peaceful, respectful parenting, like, explaining things, not just saying no and getting like angry and shouting when needs to be. And lately, since I've really been more in my feminine and he's allowed to be in his masculine because I've stopped emasculating him, I see him saying no, about certain things when they need to be said, about when
Hmm.
a kid is just crossing the line over and over again and they really
Right,
need a firm no.
right,
Um, and in the past, I too would have completely judged that and then said to him, no, babe, that, there's a different way we can say it. Like, that's not the way to
right,
do it. Now, I wouldn't dare to say that because that that just would be really disrespectful and it would be really controlling. Obviously, if
Right.
he started hitting our kids or
Sure.
something, that's a different story. This isn't harming them. This is allowing him to be in his, innate masculine energy. Um,
Right.
and so that's very similar to what you just said. And
Right. Well, and I think it goes back to the surrender thing, like what I've had to do, because there are times where it is still hard for me to like see, my son's dad, do something or say something, and I'm like, oh, that's not how I would do it. But what it kind of goes back to for me is taking on the belief of like my son chose us as parents. And so he has his like karmic relationship with me and he has his karmic relationship with his dad. And like it goes back again to like me wanting to control everyone's journey and me wanting to control everyone's path and just realizing like everyone has their own path. And like I don't know why he chose his dad, but he did. And so whatever comes up there, like that relationship just doesn't have anything to do with me.
totally,
So that's kind of like the stance I've taken on it. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's really healthy, and I'm on board for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something I wanted to mention about the masculine. What was it? It'll come to me. Yeah, just I guess finding, how you said you found Archer kind of attractive just in that primal masculine
Well,
sense.
yeah, and like made my body be like, oh, okay. Like I noticed that I got like not scared, like I wasn't scared. I'm not scared of him, but I just got very like, okay, like the man is speaking. Like it was very much like he's in control now. Like I like not wanting to like, you know, interject or like it just felt very like I don't know. It was an interesting feeling. I liked the feeling. But yeah, it was interesting.
And that's a very primal thing that,
Right.
the,
Yeah.
the sense of, oh, the man here can protect us. He's stronger than us. He can step in when needs to be. He can prevent harm from happening. And, it goes back to caveman times. It's just a very primal cellular response to feel kind of on edge and at ease at the same time when you hear a man
Right.
speaking truth.
Yeah. I kind of, what keeps coming up for me is I kind of want to talk about like emasculating because I know we keep saying that. And I imagine some people, I don't know, kind of like either mock men for being able to be emasculated or like they don't really believe it or something. But what I've had to do with the emasculation thing, because I'm like, oh, like emasculating men, doesn't that just mean that they have like weak egos or something, like, and they can't handle anything? But what has helped me is like trying to put myself in the position of like being a man and having me, I just put myself in the position because I know how I am. It's like, and having someone always like correcting you like a
Mm,
child. And I'm like,
mm,
whoa, like that would suck.
yeah.
And then I think of like how much I do it. And like, I'm like, what if I had a partner that was always correcting me just about how I was with the kids, what I ate, what I wore, like how I put things away in the house. Like, what if because I don't date people that do that. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I just don't attract people like that. And so I'm just like, what if I was with someone who was like that? And I'm like, oh my God, like it really just kind of like woke me up to just how awful that would feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to be it. And, it goes back to how my mother was with us. And,
Oh yeah,
and
totally.
so I
Yeah.
just took that on and was very controlling. Oh no, don't put that down there. And uh, when he wants to do something, oh no, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to do it that
Yeah.
way. It's just, it grates on you. And not only does it emasculate, it also like creates this wound and damage between his view of me as
Right.
the feminine. Like it's chipping away at this potential amazing light that he could see me in my
Right.
feminine.
And
Um,
in my experience, like I've notoriously dated men who, at least on like a subconscious level, like they see me as their mother. And I know that they do because they develop this sort of like almost like rebellious quality against me. Like I'm someone that they have to rebel against, which is like total like boy teenage archetype with his mother. But it's like, well, of course he sees me as his mother if I'm treating him that way. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like if I'm always correcting. So yeah, it's having, and I think it is really ingrained in our society for men and women to kind of like live out that dynamic, of like mother son. So like
yeah,
like in order to be like lovers or partners or husband and wife, it's like it's a completely different dynamic than what we're used to. And it's like to learn it is yeah, it's work, but
yeah. My husband, my mother-in-law, and I actually share a birthday.
okay.
So it's like even more reason to be
Right,
conscious not to mother him.
right,
It's very unsexy as well,
right.
mothering
Yeah,
a partner. But I know that I did it before I started doing this feminine embodiment work, and I just can't say like enough things about how it's changed my whole life, not just my marriage, but my interaction with everyone and everything has just
right,
softened. And coming from like a much deeper, more womb space, a different space than before, where I was just coming from like charging, coming more from a chesty, trying to prove things space.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much. I'm still trying to like. I'm just thinking like where like there's all these little paths that you can go down because it really does. It translates in like you were just saying in all areas of your life. Like when you soften. I'm doing this. Have you heard of? Do you know who Shannon Major is?
No.
So I'm doing this course with her called Homecoming, and it's essentially about the feminine heart and um yeah, like softening into your heart and like coming home to the beloved, which is like God. Because ultimately it's like we can, yeah, we practice or we're like in this devotional practice with the men in our lives. So with, what some people call like the mortal man, but ultimately it's like a relationship with God, and that's God, however you want to define God. You know, God, the universe, your heart. Um, yeah, it's just that's ultimately what it is. It's like a surrender to, yeah, it's just like I called it the other day, like the cosmic cock.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah, because that's kind of what it is. It's like it's surrendering to like whatever the cosmic cock or God or life or your man gives you, brings you, throws at you. And then just trusting that if you are fully devoted to it and surrendered to it and can just like be in it. I think that's the thing is we're constantly trying to like escape the feelings, whatever they are. But if we can just like let it like wash us, like just completely immerse ourselves in the experience and in the feelings and like feel it all the way through, like that's to me like where alchemy happens, and that's why it for women it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. The cosmic cock.
Yeah.
Let it penetrate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's like I said earlier, it doesn't mean that it's like it doesn't always feel good. It's not always what your ego thinks that like should be happening or what you want to happen, but trusting that God or the masculine knows what's best. And that even like, for example, in my situation, in the moment, if it seems like this is fucking terrible, like, why are you doing this to me? that if you're able to be in it, like then transformation happens, and then your life actually does go to places beyond any beyond anywhere you could have imagined or taken yourself with your mind, with your ego.
Yeah.
So it's like that to me is like where the like Celine and I are talking about this. Like it's actually pretty exciting. Celine's in soft too. I don't know if you know that, but like this, we can view it as a game, and like it's actually like a really exciting game to like really drop everything and let go because I don't know, it's just so much more magical, and I find so like life is so much more interesting that way than when like we try to steer the ship.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
yeah.
Well, I remember you shared a while ago about the Michael A. Singer book, The Surrender Experiment,
Oh yeah, that was
and
good.
it's kind of like that. And I practiced that over the past however many months. We sold our flat and then were had nothing lined up because the house we were buying pulled out, and we were just
Mm,
nowhere to go, two young kids. And my husband went and explored England and was like, okay, this town, I love this town. Let's go
mm,
there. And I had never been. And I just said, okay, let's move to this town. And it's like
mm,
2.5 hours away from anyone I know. So we
yeah.
just drove there, moved. I was really excited about it. And I arrived and I hated it.
Mm,
I felt so depressed, so isolated. I was crying every day, just completely lost myself. But
mm,
I wasn't angry or anything. I still stood by the fact that we needed to come here. I didn't know why. And
right.
then everything unraveled. Like 3 days after we arrived, we found our most like amazing house to buy.
Oh cool.
Um, and everything lined up. So we didn't have the amount of money we needed to buy this house. We were quite a lot short, but because we were there and I was so upset, a series of events lined up, and we were then given the gift of that exact amount of money to buy the house and the land. And we were in this new house a month later, and that wouldn't have happened had I not have said
Right.
yes to
Right.
his intuition of we need to move to this town.
Right.
Um, so it was a perfect example of the surrender experiment, and surrender experiment to your man.
Yeah, totally. I like that you said his intuition because that's something that Sri Namaste More also talks about is that we have this idea that men aren't intuitive like women. And I would just say that they're like, we're intuitive in different ways, but
Totally.
I want to note that like men are highly intuitive.
Highly.
Yeah. So that's something also that I've kind of realized and discovered in this whole thing. I think that maybe because of just how we've like positioned men or labeled men in our culture, it's like they might not always like be aware or like have the language for it, but they're very intuitive. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And how do you embody the feminine in your everyday life? What does it look like aside from what we've already explained?
Um, I mean, like,
What does it feel like? What
okay, what does it feel like? Because right now I feel the most surrendered I've ever felt in my life. And I was just telling my friend this yesterday. Um, I mean, right now it's just like, how do I explain it? Like before, I had this like vision of like, I want like a husband and I want kids and like the house and like I had this vision and it's not that I don't want those things anymore. I do, but it doesn't feel any longer that like my happiness is contingent on achieving or getting anything. It's like I've reached a point of contentment of like just I've just find so much magic in just day-to-day little things that I don't know. I think I'm just a lot more present. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Um, and because I'm in that state, I feel more creative.
Hmm.
So I feel like just so many like ideas and so much energy is allowed to like run through me right now because I'm not in my head about the future, like being like, well, how am I gonna get the guy? And oh, okay, I'm 33 and I turned 34 in December, and like doing the math about like how many more kids can I have before I'm 40? And like, like so I'm not like in that anymore. I'm just like that's another thing is this isn't about um like absolving yourself from desires. Like it's like yes, I those things would be lovely and nice, and I'm so much more interested in what God has in store for me. And maybe that isn't what God has in store for me. Like I have
Yeah.
no idea. But it's just I just feel more interested in the mystery now, is
Yeah.
what it's like. Yeah, it feels like the controlling and like, okay, I have this one thing that I want. So how am I going to get it? Like that just feels boring. It
Yeah.
just feels like boring. It feels exhausting. It feels like just anxiety induced. Like it just doesn't feel good in my system anymore. So I'm like, I'm actually just so much more fascinated by the mystery. So I think that kind of like sums it up. Just more fascinated with the mystery than I am and like trying to plan everything. And I've realized that, like I was saying, I'm just so much more creative now. Like, I'm actually creating a mini course currently. Um, it's, do you want to know the name of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm creating this mini course called Cash and Controversy.
Mm.
And this is like the first time I'm saying anything about it publicly, so I won't say any more. But it was just like a download that I had in like my like equinox meditations in the past like 72 hours. And so, yeah, I just feel more creative and more um, just intrigued by like day to day life and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
Oh,
sweet.
it's also, sorry, it's also realizing like that these feelings that I used to think that like I needed to source from outside of me, like love or I don't know, pleasure, like it's like I think I've gotten to a point where I've realized that like that is just who I am and I can feel those feelings anytime I want, and I'm not at the whim of someone else, or I don't need someone else to feel those things, which is not to say because it's funny because there's also a part of me that's like no, I actually do need a man to have certain experiences that I can't have by myself. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
um which is why like that is something I want, but I can still have good feelings and pleasure and love. It's different for sure, but
Yeah.
it still feels good. So yeah, it's that too. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
just good.
You're accessing a different dimension of that inner state. But
Right.
it's totally real and
Right.
amazing and just in a different dimensional form. And then when you are in relationship with a man again, you will be ready to receive, in a different dimensional form, which will be
Right.
mind blowing.
Well, and I think when we like can possess it within ourselves too, that's like what attracts it. That's what magnetizes it.
Totally,
Yeah. So
totally.
yeah,
Cool. I feel like we could just talk about this for so long. What time is it?
I know. I know. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's been an hour. Shall we leave it there?
Yeah, let's, unless you have like, oh, I was gonna say someone asked a question and I was gonna see, I feel like you, knowing you, I feel like you would be better at answering it if you wanted to take a hit at answering the question.
What do you mean your child chose you as parents?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you either believe it or you don't, but
Right.
I personally believe that a child's soul, or just a soul, a spirit form, spirit baby, um, when before has even been conceived, chooses on a soul level which mother and which father they decide to go into contract with. So, depending on what lessons need to be learned in their lives, on both sides for the father and the mother and the child, they will choose that parent and then choose to be born into it. And there's really no control. And depending on the level of consciousness that the mother, the father are at, depends on which soul will choose them, because being at a different level of consciousness will mean different lessons will be learned. And there's no like right or wrong or good or bad, depending.
Yeah.
It just is where it's at. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just add that was a great explanation. And the only thing that I would add is just it goes back to what I was saying about if if we can adopt the belief that we are literally kind of creating our entire reality, then of course, like we created who our parents are too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. You're one of the few people who I can speak to this about.
I know.
And yeah, just happy to share it, because I'm so glad that you shared it and it opened my mind. And one thing that Sri Namaste More says is that feminism is a virus that has infected families, in that it's pulling women out of their feminine roles and pulling men out of their masculine roles and pulling us out of the respect for each other's roles and
Right.
trying to make everyone equal. And it's actually damaging. So that's a
Right.
pretty intense statement, that kind of shocked me when I first heard it. I was like, "Whoa, that's strong," but I get it now. Like, I really get it.
Right. Well, you see, like we see the dismantling of families, and when you can break up the family, then you can do a lot of really bad things. So, I like that you brought that up. Obviously, that's a big topic for another time, but um, a certain I'll just say like a certain film producer that we know, who I won't name, is currently making his next documentary just about the American family and all the ways that it's being, you know, yeah, the attempts at taking it down. So that's a good topic too.
Cool. Maybe we'll do another live on feminism being a virus.
Yeah.
Catchy
Okay.
title. Okay. So much love to you, Chantal.
Bye. See you
Bye.
later.